Thank you all for joining us for today's event. My name is Nick, and I'm one of the events hosts here at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual and live events by visiting our website at powells.com. If you don't already do so, please follow us on our social media channels via Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. Today, we are excited to talk about Other Terrors, an anthology of original new horror stories edited by Vince A. Liaguno and Rena Mason. Today, they'll also be in conversation with contributors from the anthology, Tananarive Due, Jennifer McMahon, Alma Katsu, and Nathan Carson. So I'm going to give you Vince A. Liaguno is an award-winning writer, anthologist, and editor, and an occasional poet. He is the Bram Stoker Award-winning editor of the anthology Unspeakable Horror from the Shadows of the Closet. His debut novel, The Literary Six, won an Independent Publisher Award for horror and was named a finalist in Forward Magazine's Book of the Year awards. Rena Mason is a three-time Bram Stoker Award-winning author of The Evolutionist and The East End Girls. She has had nearly 24 short stories, novelettes, and novellas published in various award-winning anthologies and magazines, and writes a monthly column, often featuring special guest articles. Tananarive Due is an award-winning author who teaches Black horror and Afrofuturism at UCLA. She's an executive producer on Shudder's groundbreaking documentary Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror. A leading voice in Black speculative fiction for more than 20 years, Due has won an American Book Award, an NAACP Image Award, and a British Fantasy Award, and her writing has been included in Best of Year anthologies. Jennifer McMahon is a New York Times bestselling author of 11 novels, including Promise Not to Tell, The Winter People, and her latest, The Children on the Hill. Alma Katsu is the award-winning author of 7 novels. Her latest is The Fervor, a reimagining of the Japanese internment, and Red Widow, her first espionage novel, is a nominee for the Thriller Writers Award for Best Novel. Nathan Carson's short fiction has been published in a succession of quality anthologies and magazines. His horror novella Starr Creek predicted the Stranger Things zeitgeist, and his graphic novel adaptation of Algernon Blackwood's The Willows is being used as study material at universities around the world. So there's a little introduction for all of our speakers today. And I'm now going to turn it over to Vince to talk a little bit about how this anthology came about.
Well, first, I want to say on behalf of everybody here tonight, thank you and thank Powell so much for having us, allowing us to promote Other Terrors, which we are all completely in love with and very happy to release into the world after a long period of time. The catalyst for this actually started back in June of 2019. Lisa Morton, who was the president of the Horror Writers Association, had approached Rena and I and said, hey, we want to do this diversity anthology, and would you guys take the helm? Well, you don't hesitate when Lisa asks you to do something, so we said yes. And then as Rena and I started to talk, we kind of said that we didn't really want to, we wanted to avoid the idea of simply assembling a roster of writers that just were going to kind of check off boxes on a diversity checklist. We wanted it to be something that was more thematically organic. So we began to talk about the idea of otherness. The other is a enduring concept in the genre of horror. And we thought, if we keep the theme vague enough, it would really open up to interpretation. And then we just started batting around names of writers that we love to read. And we would kind of sit there and say, wonder what Jennifer could do with this. Wow, you know what? let's send an email. And that's kind of how we got our invited guests, who we were super, super honored and proud to have with us. And then, of course, being that it was an HWA anthology, there were 5 slots reserved for members, and we did that call of submissions blindly. So Rena and I read it without any names, any discerning characteristics, and that's how we picked those. One of the things that we were proudest of is that by managing our word count, we were actually able to increase the number of member slots from 5 to 10, which I think when you're a member of the Horror Writers Association and you're a dues paying member, you really want those opportunities. So we were super stoked to be able to do that. We're very, very proud of it. As we were putting it together, we knew we were onto something, but as the stories started to come in, and I think Jennifer's was one of the first ones, we were just like, oh my God, like we're really gonna nail this. Like this is gonna be awesome. And then, starred reviews from Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Book List. The momentum has been great. We're very excited for all of you out there to read this. And we're going to give you a little taste tonight. Each contributor is going to give you a little excerpt of the story. And I'm actually going to pass it over to my ridiculously talented co-editor who is going to share our introduction to Other Terrors.
Hi. Other Terrors, introduction by Vince Liaguno and me. From the other, all terrors flow. Since the advent of horror as a genre, fear of the unknown and fear of what we think we know has largely driven narrative. Likewise, there is little more frighteningly unknown to us than that generalized monster commonly referred to as the other. You know the one, the monster with green skin and a flat head, the alien from a distant planet, the beast that drinks blood instead of red wine, the necromancer that conjures spirits in a foreign tongue. The one that doesn't fit neatly into the small boxes in which our rigid frames of reference so comfortably exist is the one we've been conditioned to fear the most. As the film and genre expert Andrew Scahill, PhD, assistant professor of English at the University of Colorado, Denver, explains horror, it's how we work out the difference between us and them. What we know about identity formation now is that we don't really form our identity through similarity. We define ourselves by what we are not. We're constantly forming our identity by the other, by the monster, by I know who I am because I'm not that. Similarly, societal bigotries coexist in this realm of otherness. Despite the fact that all humans share the same basic anatomy and bleed the same, we tend to focus on our differences. Many of us have been conditioned from a young age to fear those different from us. Differences are scary and should trigger a fear response, right? Fear the other, the one who doesn't look like us, the one who speaks another language, the one from a foreign land, the one with unfamiliar customs and values, the one who is differently abled, the one who loves or worships differently. If they're different, they must somehow be wrong, flawed in some serious and potentially threatening way. Society's collective disposition to suspect that something that is different must also be dangerous has been long explored in horror, in both literature and film, from the classics to the contemporary. From Bram Stoker's Dracula and its exploration of xenophobia, in the idea of a fiendish Eastern European foreigner invading polite London society to ravage its women, to the queer subtext of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, and its allegory for gay panic and the suppression of sexual orientation that falls outside heteronormative boundaries. Horror has long been a conduit for the coded expressions of the subconscious fear of that which is non-conforming to the mainstream. Concepts like race and gender and sexual orientation and political ideology have long been fodder for the machinations of the horror genre. Throughout history, society has always seen itself, its condition and circumstances, its fears and collective anxieties, reflected back in its art. It should come as no surprise then, and a logical progression, that we're starting to see a tectonic shift in the concept of otherness in horror. The viewpoint is adjusting, fine-tuning to reflect a modernism in cultural evolution. As women and people of color and the LGBTQ community and those differently abled are rising up, stepping forward to demand their place at the table, the stories are recasting the other from villain to victim, modern sympathy for the traditional devil, if you will. The concept of otherness in horror is breathing, expanding its literary lungs to show the other as the oppressed, the one that must summon the courage to rise up and defeat the inhuman monsters of convention. It's no longer just us versus them. It's often them versus us in a sea change infusion of cultural context. These shades and variations of otherness challenge readers to expand their minds, to consider that the call is indeed coming from inside the house. This recurring theme of otherness that often comes up in both critical analysis of the horror genre and discussions about the prejudices and biases people have against minority groups that manifest in myriad phobias was the catalyst, the launching pad for Other Terrors. For this anthology, we set out looking for short fiction that explored the idea of fearing the other as a source of terror, in both traditional and progressive ways. We cast our net far and wide, hoping to attract a diverse roster of literary talent whose backgrounds and experiences might best be suited to interpret this theme. In some of the tales curated for this collection, the other takes literal monster form. In others, the tables are turned, the concept of otherness subverted. In still other stories, the authors crafted modern retellings of traditional narratives where otherness is a defense mechanism weaponized against oppression. Otherness has evolved and continues to evolve, and it's even more terrifying in the diversity of forms it takes. Okay, so for a little sample, I'm going to pass it on to Jennifer.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What an amazing introduction. And I just want to say I am so honored to have a story included in this anthology. I've said this before, and I told Rena when she asked me to do this, I don't write short stories, but I heard about this project and I was so excited and I was all in. And so I will read a little bit of my story, Idiot Girls. It is about two teenage girls living in an apartment building, and they're having a secret affair. And my story deals with xenophobia, homophobia, otherness, and monsters. And I'm gonna pick up a little ways into the story. So Jazz holds my hand tightly in hers as she leads me right through the pile of leaves Mr. G's been raking. We kick our feet and the leaves scatter everywhere. We're our own autumn wind, our own hurricane. Mr. G shakes his head and shakes his rake at us. Idiot girls, he roars, and we laugh, swoop like crazy birds across the parking lot, leaves in our hair, clinging to my chunky wool sweater. Idiot, we repeat, our own song, the pitch rising as we screech, idjit, idjit. We run right to the door of building B where Jazz lives. Instead of going up the stairs to her apartment, we go all the way to the back of the hall, open the heavy metal door that leads to the basement. We pause on the stairs to kiss because we can't wait a second longer. Her body presses into mine and I have to hold the railing so I don't lose my balance. Jazz tastes like cherry lip gloss and salt water. She smells like the cheap perfume she shoplifts from the drugstore. Hurrying now, Jazz leads me the rest of the way down the steep wooden steps. The basement smells like damp cement, old books, grease, and heating oil. The furnace sits at the front end of the building, pipes snaking up to bring hot water to all the apartments. We pass by the storage units, cages of 2x4 frames with stapled on chicken wire, flimsy doors with padlocks. They're stuffed full of bicycles, mildewed boxes, furniture that didn't fit in the tiny apartments upstairs. We head to the one at the end, the extra unit with no padlock. It's where everything that has no place to go gets shoved. Bags of salt for sidewalks in winter, grass seed, driveway sealant, a dented toolbox with a bent screwdriver and a rusty hammer. There are things left behind by old tenants and never gotten rid of. An old chest of drawers, a worn green velvet couch, a bicycle missing the front wheel, boxes of artifacts from people long gone. Hello, Jit, Jazz says as she pulls me down on top of her on the stained couch. We're safe here, tucked away behind the rusted file cabinets, moldering cardboard boxes, a ratty old box spring. She tugs at my sweater, my favorite, chunky and black and coming unraveled at the edges. Hello, Id. I say, brushing my lips over her neck until she shudders. I start unbuttoning her heavy wool blazer. St. Christopher's Catholic School, where her mother sends her to keep her away from public school sinners like me. I undo the last button with my teeth, ripping it off, the smooth white button like a worry stone I hold under my tongue. After, she lights a joint. I don't know where she gets pot, but she's always got it. She's naked, lounging on her back on the couch, smoking, watching me. I'm straddling her on my knees, my weight keeping her pinned to the couch. She looks so beautiful, so perfect. Her dyed red hair splayed against the worn green velvet couch. She runs the fingers of her left hand up to my belly, my breasts, brushing the nipples. Soon it'll be time to get our clothes back on, go back into the too bright afternoon. But I want to stay here, just like this, with her pinned below me forever. This isn't what I am, she says, because she always has to say it at least once, just to let me know, to keep me in check. I'm not like this, really. I mean, I like boys. Don't you like boys? Sure, I say, but the lie is thick in my throat. I grab the joint from her, take a deep hit, let it seep into my lungs. I climb off of her, slip my underwear and jeans back on. What do you think happened to that boy, she asks, the missing one? I don't know. Maybe he ran away. But the fact that they found his backpack and his bike under the bridge like that doesn't sound good, right? She turns, stretches like a lazy cat, takes another hit from the joint, watching the smoke drift up. I can't believe you bit my button off, she says, annoyance giving her voice a sharp edge. Where'd it go? She's feeling around the couch for it, pulling back the filthy cushions. I really need to find it. I see it on the stained cement floor, glinting in the dim light like a tiny moon. I pick it up without her noticing and wrap my fingers tightly around it, tuck it deep into the pocket of my jeans, a talisman, my own little secret, a little piece of her I can carry with me wherever I go. Why are you getting dressed? She asks, her voice soft again. I shrug. Come here, she orders, a low purr as she reaches out her hand to pull me back down. I'm on top of her again, my mouth on hers, her fingers running up my spine, making my whole body feel electric, dangerous. We're all hands and teeth and tongue, and she's sliding my jeans back off, and then everything freezes. Time stops. Her body goes rigid beneath me. The temperature in the basement, already cold, seems to drop. She shoves me off her with a strength I didn't know she had, covers her bare chest with her hands. I land on the floor, jeans tangled around my legs, hips smashing against the concrete. What the? I say, rubbing my hip. She's gone pale, her eyes fixed on some point beyond me. I turn and follow her gaze. There, back in the shadows, over near the boiler, a pale face watches. He's angled in a way that he can see us around the barricade of junk. He steps forward, his face framed in the dim light coming in through the rectangular window. Mr. G. And I will end there. Thank you. And I will pass it on to hear from Alma.
Hi, that was great. That was great. I can't wait to read the rest of it. That was fabulous. I'm going to read you the beginning of my story in the anthology, which is Waste Not. It's about being an outsider, even in your own family. Today was the day. Jane had come prepared, 55-gallon contractor garbage bags, cardboard boxes carefully broken down from the last time they'd been used, packing tape and a tape gun, Sharpies for labeling. She'd taken a day off work for this. Her mother-in-law, Mildred, had put her off for 2 years, but Jane would be put off no longer. The house had been in bad shape before Frank died, but it had gone downhill precipitously since. Mildred, never a fan of housework, had ignored it completely once Frank was gone. Not that Jane blamed Mildred. It was inevitable once you got to a certain age. You stopped caring about the little things. The only things that Mildred paid attention to these days were her doctor's appointments and craft shows at the senior center, where she sold her jewelry. In her advanced years, she seemed to have developed a blindness to squalor. Not that Kevin had been able to help. Mildred had always been a control freak, used to having her way with both Frank and her son. It had led to a testy relationship for Jane with her mother-in-law because Mildred had expected the same from her. But there had been times when, in good conscience, Jane couldn't go along. Kevin's requests that she humor his mother grew more exasperated over the years until it had become a sore point between them. Not that it was a problem anymore. They'd both hoped that now that Frank was gone, Mildred would let herself be moved into a retirement home. There was no one to coax the temperamental furnace into life, the first cold snap, or clear snow from the quarter-mile-long driveway. Someone in their 80s shouldn't live by themselves in these woods, where cell service was spotty and the nearest emergency responders were over 20 minutes away. However, the months came and went, and Mildred remained resolute. She told Jane on more than one occasion the only way she was going to leave this house was in a body bag. "I'm going to start with the closet in the spare bedroom," Jane told Mildred as she swept in with her supplies. It seemed an easy choice for a place to start. Mildred sat in her armchair, looking up at Jane with a contemptuous eye, like a stubborn, spooky horse, afraid of what lay ahead, but too ornery to back up. At least she knew enough not to argue. They'd argued over this since Frank died. Well, it was well past time to clean out. No one could enjoy living like this. It was unsafe, not to mention unsanitary. As the possessions accumulated, her in-laws had blamed the other. Frank had gone through hard times growing up and wouldn't let anything go. Mildred had too many hobbies, each requiring a ridiculous amount of tools and supplies. Nothing was ever thrown away. Everything was just added to the heap. The last time Jane poked around in the basement, what she found was enough to give her shivers. Old chemicals used for Mildred's pottery glazes or to develop photographs in Frank's abandoned darkroom. Acids for Mildred's jewelry. Mix the wrong two and you could produce a cloud of poisonous gas. When she brought this up to Mildred, told her that she was living above a veritable powder keg, Mildred only tut-tutted and gave her a superior smile. Waste not, want not. And so it had come to this. The guest bedroom hadn't seen a guest in at least a decade, Jane was pretty sure. Out-of-state families stopped coming to see them after Frank grew weaker. It had become storage, boxes piled to the ceiling. Mildred objected to Jane's involvement, asserting a right to privacy, like the contents of her closet was a national secret. Jane wasn't a gossip and had no interest in the recesses of her in-laws' house, but there was no one else to save the old woman from herself. It had been dumped on her shoulders, as she always knew it would. Kevin never could stand up to his parents, particularly his mother. What made it funnier was that Jane never felt part of her husband's family. She'd known the Mulligans for as long as she could remember. They'd been a close-knit group in their own peculiar way, and Jane had always been an outsider. This apartness had bothered her when she was a teenager and Kevin had been her first boyfriend, the first important thing that was hers. She'd wanted to be accepted as part of their clan, but that never happened. Like there was an invisible membrane around the three of them that she could never penetrate. Now, however, her status as an outsider was a bit of a comfort. "You may take Frank's shoes and sweaters," Mildred had said with a sniff when she finally acquiesced. "Someone may get some use out of them." On the floor of the closet were a half dozen pairs of men's dress shoes arranged on an old-fashioned shoe rack. Next to it was a pile of everyday shoes, all worn to the point of exhaustion. No point pretending you could preserve a man's life forever by refusing to remove his things. Life was more than an accumulation of possessions, after all. Jane tried to sort through the heap, but it was pointless. No one in Whitaker County would want these shoes. Mildred would demand to know where Jane was taking them. Goodwill? Salvation Army? But Jane could see no option but the landfill. She filled 2 boxes and moved them to the hall. At the bottom of the stairs, Mildred looked up expectantly from her armchair, like a relative at the hospital expecting bad news. Jane went back to the guest room. Her heart sank to see the closet floor was packed with boxes. Dutifully, she hauled one out and peeled back the flaps. It held a random assortment of Frank's stuff, stray buttons and cufflinks he probably hadn't used since the 80s, old letters bundled together with twine, instruction manuals for household items that had stopped working a long time ago, eyeglasses with one lens missing, all of it dusty and old and forgotten. Everywhere she looked, more neglected items pressed forward for her attention. Look at me, remember me. It was dizzying and exhausting and made her sad. The newspaper clipping caught Jane's eye because it was the only one. It had to be important. Local woman's body found in Drummond Pond. When had this happened? She searched the brittle square of paper for the date, but that part was missing. This must have happened a long time ago if she hadn't heard of it. She'd ask around tomorrow at work, see if anyone knew about it. The body of Margaret Winston was found submerged in Drummond Pond 18 days after she'd been reported missing by family, according to Rochester police. Winston of 51 Stonebridge Hill, 2 doors down. That's why Frank saved the newspaper clipping. The dead woman had been a neighbor. Jane set it beside the tape gun. She would definitely ask about it when she went back tomorrow. She turned to the closet. The rod was packed full to bursting. She pulled out the heaviest looking items first, old sports coats, furred with dust on the shoulders, colors and styles that had been popular before the turn of the century. Her heart sank again. No one would want these except maybe a theatrical costume department. Nothing to do but pack it up. The more clothing she took off hangers, the more it seemed to spring forward. There was a never-ending supply, like the brooms in The Sorcerer's Apprentice. A half an hour later, Jane decided to take a break. She'd started carrying boxes downstairs, stacking them by the front door to take out to the truck. Mildred looked over from her chair, still clutching the armrest like an unhappy monarch on her throne. "Are you almost done, dear?" "Not hardly." She started back upstairs, then remembered the clipping. "Say, do you know anything about a woman down the street who was found dead? Margaret Winston? She would have been your neighbor. Do you know her?" Her mother-in-law looked wistful. "Margaret Winston. There's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Why do you ask?" Jane told her about the clipping. Mildred frowned, as she did when she was displeased, which was an awful lot of time. "I thought I said you could take the shoes and sweaters, nothing else. I don't know that I like the idea of you poking around in Frank's things. We've been through this. You need to face reality," was on the tip of her tongue, but it was too harsh to say to a woman watching as the last traces of her husband were being boxed up and taken away. "To make some space. Think what you can do with that closet once it's cleared. You can move your jewelry supplies in there." Mildred averted her eyes. No one could force her to see what she didn't want to. Jane went back to work. She pulled piece after piece of clothing off wire hangers and dropped them into boxes. It should all go in trash bags, but she would spare Mildred's feelings by pretending it was all going to a donation center. Button-down shirts. There had to be dozens of them, mostly old, frayed, yellowed at the collars, exuding a dusty, sour smell. Her family had shopped at Frank's grocery store her entire life, and she remembered seeing Frank in these button-down shirts under his canvas apron. Later, he switched to polo shirts. Undoubtedly, she'd find a vein of those in the closet, or maybe a chest of drawers. Why had Frank saved each and every shirt he'd ever owned? "Waste not," she heard in Mildred's smug tone. Her mother-in-law probably thought she'd cut them into rags or use them in a quilt one day. Jane pulled the shirts off hangers one by one and dumped them in a box too. And then she saw it. One of Frank's old shirts splattered with brick red stains. Blood. She paused. Well, Frank had worked in a grocery. Maybe he'd gotten too close to the butcher one day. She started to take it off the hanger. That explanation wasn't right. Didn't fit the blood spatter pattern. She held the shirt up. The longer she looked at it, the more uneasy she felt. She folded it brusquely and dropped it into the box with the others. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nathan.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed all of your stories in this book so much.
Oh, thank you.
So my story is called Help, I'm a Cop, and I'm going to read the middle of it. At the beginning, the cop in question wakes up disoriented, immobilized, and injured in a dry creek bed, and in his delirium is kind of remembering the steps in his life that brought him to that point. I am 10. My best friend Kyle meets me in the park closest to the Forest Theater in Forest Grove. His older brother works there and can sneak us in to see an R-rated movie. This week it is Lord of Illusions. I am both terrified and thrilled. The song Magic Moments sticks with me. I am 12. Kyle lies on my bed beneath my erasure poster. I am kissing my way up his legs. I have just begun to unzip his pants when my father bursts into the room. After I move schools, I never see Kyle again. The sun is down, but there are other lights now. Headlights, phone lights, fires. The voices and laughter now compete with music and fireworks and breaking bottles. A thumping beat echoes down the canyon and a crowd begins to cheer. The wind is warmer than the night it cloaks. Some details begin to return. I'm lying in the dry bed of Wapato Lake. The sheriff sent me here because it's almost 20 years to the day since 9/11. We got a tip that a big group of kids from Hillsborough were planning a rave. Gatherings of over 100 people, even outdoors, have been outlawed for more than a year. And despite my best efforts, everyone on the force knows about my taste for electronic dance music. Since my right arm won't comply, I reach around with my left. My holster is empty. Keyring and wallet are gone too. I remember driving here in a Washington County Ford Police Interceptor utility hybrid SUV. It was morning then. No signs of stage construction or criminal activity. The only life I could see was an old apple tree. Dead fruit litters the ground around it. A few apples still cling to their branches, though. They are red empires with collars of green retreating into their stems. I was planning to get breakfast at the little cafe in Gaston after my survey, but a bite of fresh fruit won't spoil my appetite. I reach for the closest. Before I can connect, the apple falls right into my hand, then bounces out and onto the ground, rolling under a hollow fallen tree just a few feet away. On hands and knees, I rock the log a bit and roll it over. On the soil beneath is a discarded medical mask and a 4-foot-long pit viper. Out front of the shop, a woman violently shakes a rattle over her baby carriage. Signs in the window advertise Fago soda and Kratom. I catch a glimpse of her kid on my way in. I am 18. Unless I make some big life changes, I will never have a child of my own. The clerk inside says he can't help me on site, but he gives me a number. I keep jars of muscle milk on the windowsill of my apartment. An ammo box on the top shelf of my bedroom closet houses my syringes and steroids. In a few months, I am still short, but no longer feel small or weak. At the gym, a guy with Iron Cross tattoos tells me that he's signing up for the police academy. I suppress my urge to ask him out. We fill out the paperwork together and celebrate with beers. Later in the evening, I think he's leaning in for a kiss. I purse my lips. He headbutts me hard enough to draw blood. We are both accepted into the academy. It is September 11th, 2001. I am 16. I'm eating a bowl of Frosted Flakes and watching the second tower fall. I ask my father, "Who's flying those planes?" He answers, "The worst people there are." It's September 11th, 2021. I am 36. I've been a police officer in one state or another for over 15 years. I'm lying on the ground while young people dance and drink, smoke and shout all around me. "That's not just any pig," says the shadow of one masked youth above me. "Don't you recognize him?" "How can you be sure he's the same one?" asks another. He pries his mask up to take a long pull from a bottle of white wine. "I watched the footage 30 times. I doxed him too. I know who this fucker is." I brace for the kick, but just then the music stops. "Hey," says the other, "I think someone said the man is ready. Almost time to get this burn started." I am 4. I am watching Nitro with my parents. Roddy Piper has just beaten Bret Hart and won his 3rd United States heavyweight championship. We all cheer. Piper lives on a ranch in Gaston, Oregon. I think someday I will retire there. A distant revving engine wakes me. Sound looms down from the promontory above the canyon. At the foot is a wooden structure shaped vaguely like a person. Someone props me up from behind and leans me against the fallen tree. Torchbearers light a wreath around the neck of the man, a burning snake swallowing its tail. I watch as the man catches fire next. Live drums and chants throb like a heartbeat as the flames lick higher. The moon in the sky is a waxing crescent, a silver sliver that spins in my vision like a boomerang or a scythe. Red and blue lights whirl in the night air as my SUV sails over the cliff edge and crashes down onto the man. 1,000 people scream in elation. Fireworks sail into the sky as the gas tank of my SUV ignites and explodes. 13 months earlier, I am packing. It's the night before my team's deployment in Portland. For 2 decades, I have kept myself from searching Kyle on the internet. Tonight, my resolve wavers. He is married with children. His profile picture is circled by a rainbow border. His husband is a public defender. I close my laptop in my suitcase and do not sleep. I'm holding a shield behind the fence. Grenades flash amidst heavy gas and smoke. Commands chirp in my earpiece. We brace. A water bottle strikes my helmet. The fence comes down. We run as one into the crowd swinging our batons. I connect with an uppercut swing and watch the rioter go down. As others drag her away, she pulls off her N95 mask. I see the blood on her chin. She is black, elderly. My baton arm hangs slack as she disappears into the mist. It gets less uplifting from there.
Ooh. It's not supposed to be uplifting.
No, it's not. So, rock star Tananarive Due.
Oh, come on. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm loving all these stories. And let me just jump in here since I'm the final reader. I like to read up to the end, but I can't do that with this story. So this is a second section. I like to write child narrators. I do a lot of child narrators. This kid is a boy between 10 and 12. I don't remember. But he's been sent away to spend a few days with his mysterious grandmother that his mother does not speak to, with his very cool uncle. And I think that's all you need to set up a story. And let me get my timer going. Okay, it's already going. I'd fallen asleep to the rhythmic coughing of Uncle Ricky's engine as it climbed the steep road. So by the time I woke up, we were in the woods. I jolted awake when his tires skidded unsteady on the packed gray slush. At first, I thought I was back on the plane. Snow. I sat up, electrified. Every window in the car was filled with the sight of white clumps of snow draped across craggy branches of fir trees, piled in what looked like hills on either side. A few flakes were hitting the windshield like pale butterflies before the wipers washed them away. Uncle Ricky was grinning again too, infected by my excitement. Pretty when it first falls down, ain't it? He said. Can I get out and touch it, please? He turned on his blinking yellow hazards and let me jump out of the car to catch snow on my tongue and kick at the snowdrifts to watch them scatter. It was a fairyland. My clothes were soaked by the time I got back in the car, but Uncle Ricky turned up his heater and let me sip warm coffee from a thermos. I didn't care how bitter it was because at least it was warm. And my heart was full of excitement for the next 20 minutes at least. And I was with family, which was no small thing since my father lived in Jacksonville and my mom's family lived in Texas, California, and Germany. So I didn't see any of them often. Mom blamed the distance on bad memories, but they weren't my bad memories. The drive was the good part, the best part. Here it is, Uncle Ricky said, slowing the car. I only saw the snow at first, a sheet of white, so I wiped away the condensation on the windshield. We were approaching wooden cattle fencing topped with snow, the sagging gate hanging open. As the car crawled past, I made out a tall, rusted insignia discarded against the side of the fence rails, written in fancy script, the Lazy M. I almost asked Uncle Ricky about it since Mom always called grandmother's place Bear Creek Lodge. I wish I had. If I had, the whole incident might never have happened. 20 yards ahead, as we drove past the low, drooping fir branches, a long wooden porch came into view, light shining from behind the curtains. I felt my second big disappointment. Mom had called grandmother's lodge a resort for Negroes during segregation, but it looked just like a regular old two-story house, only made of wood. The cedar was an uneven gray from age, not pretty at all. 3 or 4 shiny visitors' cars parked on the side of the house were the only evidence that anything inside was worth seeing. 2 lights stared down in golden yellow from twin second-story windows. Below, the porch wrapped around the house like a ragged grin, gapped from missing porch rails. I tried to think of a way to convince Uncle Ricky to drive me back to the airport, but no excuse I thought up could change the fact that my ticket wouldn't be good for another 3 days. I was stuck. The house looked dangerous for reasons I couldn't explain even to myself. Are there bears here? I looked for a clue in its name. Uncle Ricky laughed. No more than anywhere else in the woods. We don't see killer grizzlies this far south, just black bears. Don't feed them, you'll be fine. Doubt you'll see none anyway. Bear Creek doesn't have bears just like Atlanta doesn't have peach trees. Every other street is peach tree down there, ain't it? I bet every street in Miami is named for the ocean. I shrugged, annoyed by his small talk about Miami, when Mom always complained that he never came to visit. He was a plumber by trade and made good money, she always said, so why didn't he come see her more? Then he'd know all about Miami street names. Listen, he went on, voice assuring. Some years back, mother got her feelings hurt by Hollywood and holed up here by herself. For 5 years, she wouldn't see nobody, and I mean nobody. If she made it alone, you'll do fine with all of us here. Got her feelings hurt how? Folks decided she was too old-fashioned, that's all. Times change. They treat her like a curse, like she sold her soul. Half the folks will talk to her, only have their hand out. Uncle Ricky parked, careful to keep several feet between him and the mile-long, shiny red caddy closest to his space. Beside that caddy, Uncle Ricky's car looked like it belonged in the junkyard on Sanford and Son. Uncle Ricky kept his hands on his steering wheel, staring at a door on the side of the house with frilly white curtains, like the house had put him in a trance. I was in my own trance, staring beyond the 3 steps leading to that back door, trying to understand the snow. A small mound rested there, soft and white, not like the grimy snow ground into the road. A few flakes puffed out as if the mound had sneezed. Was it settling? Mr. Ramos, my science teacher, said we should consider the world with a curious mind, so I tried to figure it out without asking Uncle Ricky. I waited 2 seconds, and the snow puffed again. This time, a dark hole appeared at the center of the mound. Could a cat or small dog be buried there? The snow itself seemed to come to life, shivering flakes free, and then the entire mound moved in a shimmy, undulating away from the porch, snake-like. A twig snapped beneath its motion, or I might have thought I was imagining it. Then the mound fell flat. No cat or dog emerged to explain it. The snow just settled to stillness. I slowed down my heart by telling myself that it must be a normal thing, that it was childish to be scared of snow. But I think I knew better even then. Uncle Ricky slapped his palms against the steering wheel, making me jump. Well, I realized I was holding my breath. My socks were still damp, so my toes felt tingly. I wondered if I'd only dreamed any fun, just as maybe I dreamed the dancing, breathing snow. Well, what? Ready to go in and see Mother? He could have been talking to me or to himself. I nodded, shivering. It was a bold-faced lie. And I'm going to leave it at that. And I forgot to mention the name of the story. It's called Incident at Bear Creek Lodge.
Can I just say that it is such a thrill to hear each of you read those? I mean, I remember how I felt the first time I read them, but to hear you guys bring them alive, wow, that was a treat.
Oh, great. Yes, I agree. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Man, I can't wait to read the rest of your story, Tananarive. And Nathan, that was amazing. Just
Thank you.
amazing.
Well, I'm fortunate I got to read all of your stories and they're killer.
Do you all have books and I don't, or is there? Okay.
We have them, but by default, we went out and bought them. The contributor copies have not come yet. We will check into that tomorrow.
I see what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
I think I'm going to break down and go out to the store and buy a copy. I can't wait any longer, especially after tonight hearing everyone.
No, that's masterful. I got to find out what was under the snow.
I know.
I want her book to be, I want that story to be brought into a full-length novel. It's that good.
Wow.
I wrote it as a kind of a prologue to a script I wanted to write. I love like the woods and outdoor solid, isolation horror. So really, I want to write a script about that boy when he grows back, coming back with his own family. And then, yeah, that thing under the snow is a lot bigger.
Uncle's a lot of fun.
Man.
So
Are you all ready for some questions?
Sure.
Let's do it. Okay. So Richard Lease writes, his question is, I'm curious to hear how each writer came up with their idea for their piece in this anthology. So we start with whoever wants to start. Whoever wants to start on that.
maybe we should go in the same order again. Is that
Same
easier?
order, yeah.
If that works for you all. So maybe Jennifer, if you want to start.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Where did I come up with the idea? I knew that I wanted to write about something sort of channeling my own young adult memories of being a girl growing up, knowing that she's different, something kind of exploring otherness. And so I thought back to what it was like having like secret girlfriends and being in these relationships where we didn't dare tell anyone, or where I wanted to tell someone and the other girl was like, no way, I'm straight, we're not telling anyone. So that's kind of where the starting point for the story was. And I'm not like a plotter or a planner or outliner, so I really didn't know where it was going to go. I had my two characters and I put them in their setting and just kind of went from there, and the story sort of grew organically from there. And before I knew it, I was writing a monster story, which was really fun.
This is actually a question I've been dreading. Rena knows the answer to it, because a member of my family may be watching this or may see it in the future. I'm not going to give too many details, but I actually thought of the story after I was cleaning out somebody's closet in their house after somebody passed away.
Mm, those are the best.
Truth in fiction.
Yeah, very truth.
For me, I wrote this story in September of 2020, and I was living in Portland. We were 6 months into the pandemic with very few answers. Trump was still in office, and my city of Portland was invaded by these DHS rent-a-thugs that were assaulting peaceful protesters. And I wrote this as like a cathartic means of dealing with how I felt at that time. And I just was kind of thinking in a Kafka-esque way, you know, instead of waking up one day and you're a cockroach, like, what if you realized, oh my God, I'm a cop?
I thought that was funny.
That was about it. This is one of the scariest things I could imagine. So.
That's great. I love that answer. So I had just been listening to the audiobook for some Donald Bogle scholarship on early Black actors in Hollywood and the difficulties they had. You know, I mean, the only roles you could get were as domestics or cooning as sort of the comic relief. And you think about those kind of actors like, oh my gosh, what's her name from Hattie McDaniel, for example, right? Who famously said, I had to play a maid or be a maid kind of thing. So this is really more a human horror story, although there is a creature in it. And I hope readers can be patient with sort of trying to see that connection between this woman who feels perhaps that she was monstrous, you know, and some of the decisions that she made in her career and her isolation in the woods and what happened to her. And this kid who's meeting his mysterious grandmother for the first time, and it's sort of a collision. So it's really also about intergenerational trauma. And in this case, one of the reasons for that intergenerational trauma is that the choices that this actress had to make or felt she had to make to get work in Hollywood, and how they kind of blew up in her face once the 70s. It's set in the 70s, which I forgot to say, the 70s, and now the Black Power movement is growing, and she's way not just out of fashion, but is considered a coon and a sellout, and that's very painful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you all for giving that background there. So I have another question here from Andrew Walter. And his question is, first and foremost, I guess this question might be for Vince and Rena. So the first and foremost, congratulations to Vince, Rena, and all the contributors, authors of this beautiful release. Did Vince and Rena ever disagree on a story acceptance that still made it into the anthology? Okay, we want some, yeah.
I don't think we disagreed once.
We didn't.
I really don't think when we were going through, well, with our invited contributors, each one that came in, we were just like gobsmacked. We just were like, oh my God, these are so awesome.
Amazing.
I mean, we were casting them in our heads. We were doing the movie versions. I mean,
yes, we were.
And let me tell you something, the grandmother in the incident at Bear Creek, those of you of a certain age will remember a wonderful actress named Diane Carroll.
Right.
And Carol is the grandmother. Yeah. Read the story and tell me I'm wrong.
Older Diane Carroll, though. Older.
Okay, older, of course.
Yeah.
But Rena, when we were doing the member submissions, I don't think we disagreed at all.
No, not at all. I like I had said earlier to Nathan, the hardest part was the stories that were the final stories, and some of them were so similar and they were all so good. And in the end, we really didn't argue. It came down to breaking down which one fit the theme the best for us, and that would go with all the other stories. And that's how we came to the decisions. But no, we worked really well together.
Yeah, the HWA members had a little bit of a harder or a bigger burden, because as we took in the stories from our invited contributors, there was already now kind of a cohesiveness coming together with the theme and the atmosphere. So we were kind of already forming this preconceived idea of, where this was going. So the member submissions actually were a little bit more harder to kind of choose, because they really had to fit into this evolving atmosphere and mood of the anthology, if you will. So the ones that made it in, kudos, because it was a hard choice. We had quite a few that we held for a second reading, went back, debated on. We had copious. We were using submittable. I remember we just had notes and notes and notes. Thank you, Andrew. That was a great question.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to ask a question myself. Nathan talked about, he used the word catharsis and cathartic when he was talking about that. And I was wondering, as writers, do you find writing horror stories, can that be cathartic in a certain way? Maybe like even exploring fear as a type of like exposure therapy for your own sort of things like that. Whoever wants to answer, if they agree with that.
Well, this story for me certainly was cathartic.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think in general, yeah, I do find it more so. I'm picking up speed. I'm starting to think of how I'm going to purge myself of certain things through writing this story or that. What about you guys? I know Jennifer's so sweet and so nice. She can't possibly be like that.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. Yeah, I mean, I find like I'm always, for me, writing is about exploring my own fears and biases and dealing with my own stuff on the page. And in this story, I had to go back and take a hard look at my own like internalized homophobia when I was a teenager growing up, and the homophobia of the people around me, and also the way that one group of others kind of ostracizes and battles against another group of others, which is just a totally messed up thing to do, but it's something that fascinates me, and I dealt with in my story. And yeah, and I had to take a hard look at my own self, and that's what writing is about sometimes for me, is really kind of turning the lens on myself and my own stuff and working it out on the page. Not really getting any answers, usually just coming up with more questions, but sometimes it's the questions that are the point and give me stuff to think about, and maybe will help readers think too.
I guess for my part, I wrote it with the intention of it being cathartic, because there were these dark, scenario that we were living through that I wanted to put out onto the page. And I do think it was helpful for me to express all that, but it also ended up with this really dark, depressing story that it was hard to edit, because I didn't even want to look at it and go back to that place. And for a long time, I felt that way until it was accepted into an anthology on HarperCollins with all of you folks. And now I'm just like want to dance when I think about it.
Great. For me, I'm just anticipating, I know that there are some readers who will be like, what the, at the end of my story, because of the interweaving of human and supernatural horror and making that connection. And I think what really works for me with horror, and I think the reason my late mother, who was a civil rights activist, loved horror and actually passed that love on to me, is that it enables you to sort of give a face to a feeling, right? It gives you a demon, a monster, a creature. You can feel how you want to feel about the grandmother in this story. One reviewer described her as a terrible person, and she kind of is. But also she didn't start out that way, right? So what was her journey? How do you give face to the trauma that people have gone through? And that was what I was trying to do with that story. And it did feel cathartic. It absolutely did. I feel very, very sad for so many talented people, not just actors, obviously, but so many talented people throughout history who just never got their chance because of discrimination. So yeah, very cathartic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for all those answers. That's great. So I think we'll kind of do kind of one more question, just kind of one that, oh, we've got a question here. Good. Okay, I won't have to answer one. Let's see. Oh, not a question. Okay. We have from Gabby D says, not a question. I just want to say thank you for sharing, and I'm so excited to pick up this anthology.
Thank you, Gabby.
Well, thank
Gabby,
you.
you have it before the contributors.
Yeah.
I mean,
So we'll kind of do a question that a lot of listeners and audience like to always know is, what other writers would you recommend, and what are you reading right now? Or start with Jennifer again. You're ready.
I just finished an amazing YA book called Cemetery Boys. And I don't have the name of the author, and I'm totally blanking, and I feel terrible, but it's like
I'll put it in the chat for you. It's Aiden Thomas.
Yes. Oh my gosh, such a good book. I love it. I've been trying to read more YA and young adult stuff and middle grade, kind of creepy, speculative horror stuff, and I really enjoyed that a lot. So that's the last thing I read, and everything by anyone, these guys, all these folks on the panel, and all the people in the anthology, read all their books. I highly recommend all those.
Yeah, ditto on that. I've been singing Gabino Iglesias's next book, The Devil Takes You Home.
yeah.
I think it's going to be out very soon. It's fabulous. It's violent. You got to know that up front. But if you're okay with violence, and I am, you really want to read this book because it has one of the most original horror tropes that's come along in a long time. And then I just finished reading a book. I don't think it's going to be out for a few months. It's by a Danish writer. Her first name is Maria. Her last name, I can't remember. And I just put the book away, so I can't show it to you. But it's called First Comes Summer. And it's set in Viking times. And the ending is just will make your jaw drop. I love books where you read through and it's okay. And then all of a sudden, like, it just clicks at the end. It is amazing. First Comes Summer.
And Gabino is also in Other Terrors. He has a story in the anthology.
Excellent.
And he's just an awesome guy too.
And to promote another author in the anthology, I mean, if you all in the audience don't read Stephen Graham Jones, what are you doing? So just want to shout him out. And if you haven't read him, I started with The Only Good Indians. That was my first. So I think that's a good first. It's really hard for me to get scared by a book. And it got under my skin.
I think one of the best books that hit me the hardest the last couple of years is Song for a New Day by Sarah Pinsker. It's about society and specifically the rock and roll scene after a worldwide pandemic. And it came out about 6 months before our worldwide pandemic. So it's not only like brilliantly written, but also incredibly prescient. And it ended up winning the Nebula Award.
What's it called again?
Song for a New Day.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Okay.
Brilliant stuff.
That sounds awesome. Well, yeah, well, thank you all so much for talking about that. And yeah, I mean, thanks to you for being with us here today. And definitely everyone out there, go check out Other Terrors. We will have it, you can get, we have a link for it to buy it on powells.com. We will have it in the stores very soon. So
you got the shirt.
Amazing shirt. Is that shirt available somewhere, Tananarive?
We got it from the editors, so I
Oh,
have
okay.
Yeah.
It's a contributor only special.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
Collector's
I
item.
love that.
We've got the refrigerator magnets and the tote bags too.
Okay,
Okay.
Good stuff.
Awesome.
Well, anyway, yeah, thank you all so much.
Great, everybody. Great
Thank
hearing
you.
Thank you for having.
Bye.
Thank you.
Part of this. Good night.
Good
Good night, everyone.
Good night.